In 2018, the South African College of Applied Psychology found that 1 in 6 South Africans suffer from anxiety, depression, or substance abuse disorders. During a debate last year on the prevalence of mental illness in South Africa, Deputy Minister of Health, Dr. Sibongiseni Dhlomo, said about 75% to 95% of people with mental disorders in low to medium income households are unable to access services. Well, for more on this, we speak now to clinical and sports psychologist and life coach, Dr. Keitumetse Mashego. Dr. Mashego, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for joining us on our program this morning. I mean, we've all ushered in 2023. It's a new year. There's a lot of excitement, but some of us may still be fatigued and even taxed by the year before. How do we adequately prepare for the year that's coming?
Good morning, and thank you for having me, and good morning to everyone watching. I think first and foremost, it's very important when we're starting the year to actually look at how we set our goals, because I think as we've seen, the trend is for people to then have New Year resolutions. So it's very important for us to actually, when we set those goals, whatever goals they are, whether it's for weight loss, whether it's for changing a habit, or whether it's goal setting, that we need to be realistic and show ourselves grace, understanding that unlearning a habit or that was there for a while is something that cannot be done overnight.
Yeah.
And I think that we go into it and people have this black and white type of thinking that if I don't do this by ABC, then it means I'm a failure. And that's where then you get people by the end of the month, they're already fatigued with their goals or, their ambitions. So it's very important that you do not set yourself up for failure with the pressure you put on yourself. And not only that, the pressure that society puts on us to have specific things at a specific age, I think that also plays a role. And social media, people posting all sorts of achievements, all sorts of things, that can also put a bit of pressure. So it's very important to be self-aware and to do the internal work that you need to do for yourself. And, and deal with whatever it is that caused you to have that habit in the first place, whatever it is that internal conversation that you need to have with yourself that brought you to this state where you are setting this goal or setting this habit or wanting to unlearn this habit.
Something else that often happens, Dr. Mashego, is, coming off of the high of the holiday season and all the festivities and, sort of returning to a more sedentary life, when you return to work and the kids go back to school and that routine sort of kicks back into high gear, there is often, a drop in one's, I suppose, feelings of confidence, of feeling good about themselves. Those positive vibes that I think all of us were sort of riding throughout the festive season can take a bit of a downturn from the beginning of the year onwards.
Definitely, and that's why it's always important, to be present in the moment or to learn how to be present in the moment. I'm of view that we constantly on survival mode, going for the next thing, going for the best thing, setting the next goal, and we need to actually sit with ourselves and make sure that we do not we are understanding why we're triggered by certain things and why certain things happen in our lives, but to actually do the internal work, because you're stuck with yourself for the rest of your life. So you might as well start being comfortable with yourself and understanding what's going on internally that brings you that down at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
And I think that's where people, often do not want to go there. It's human nature not to want to sit with ourselves. And the irony is it's important to sit with ourselves so that we can actually advance or go forward or heal or learn and grow and be okay with ourselves.
Yeah.
Comfortable in our skin, yes.
I mean, that statistic that I read out earlier, 1 in 6 South Africans suffering from some kind of anxiety, depression, or some kind of mental health disorder is quite startling, to say the least. I mean, what are some of the telltale signs that someone that someone that's close to you, is perhaps going through a mental health challenge, or is perhaps feeling anxious, or may even be dealing with bouts of depression?
I think the obvious one would be the change in behavior. So someone who was talkative, suddenly they're a bit withdrawn, or the other way, someone who was withdrawn is suddenly just, overcompensating or talking as if, out of character. So when someone starts to act out of character, that's usually one of the biggest signs, but also changes in certain behaviors such as alcohol intake, substance use, spontaneous activity that they were not into before, and someone maybe who was active and then suddenly there's a drop in that. Someone who is always unsettled, they're never comfortable in one space. And some people who are verbal, they will verbalize their unhappiness, but some do not always do that. They just don't have the energy to get out of bed. So there's different signs because we're unique individuals, but when you know someone or see that they're acting out of character, I think it's important to show them that kindness, but also understand you're not the professional. And, with psychological things, people must want help. And that's always the trick that comes into play with mental health illness. Someone must want the help. Someone must accept that they have a problem, which is not always easy because there's a lot of stigma around seeing a psychologist or having a psychiatric or mental health problem. So I think as society, we still have a long way to go in terms of just, reducing the stigma around seeking help for anxiety, depression. And it does not mean that you are weak or that you are not, strong enough. It just means that you are more predisposed to it. I always compare it to people having things like diabetes. Some people are more predisposed to diabetes than they are to other things. And it's the same with mental health illness. Some people are more predisposed to it. And it doesn't mean that they're weak or that they've done anything wrong. It's just how they're wired. Yeah. And I think we need to have more of those conversations.
Yeah. I mean, what sort of role, I wonder also, do caregivers and loved ones play in helping those who, as you say, can be predisposed to feelings of anxiety, to issues around mental health and depression? Because that in and of itself can be quite the heavy burden for another individual to sort of take on those issues and to try and assist the other individual. But to help is absolutely important. It takes us back to the saying, you are your brother's keeper. So how can we help those who are in need of help without it in turn negatively or adversely affecting your own personal space?
I think when you are dealing with someone with a mental health problem, especially when they're in denial or unaware, it becomes a bit challenging when you're not the professional, but the family or someone around that person. But what I would suggest is that be kind in that understanding that this person is not intentionally feeling down, it's not intentionally feeling anxious, that they cannot snap out of it. So watch also the language that you talk to these people who are not feeling well. You need to make sure that you're not expecting them to snap out of whatever it is that they are feeling, that they're not intentionally doing this, to show them some kindness, but also to understand that you as the helper, as the family member, can only go so far, because as I indicated, the person has to want help. So when you have, talked to them about seeing someone and you've done your bit, but you see that they still are not going, so it then becomes a need for you to seek help for yourself, because now you're dealing with someone who's not seeking help, and obviously that might cause you frustration or you anxiety, right? So it's also important that you care for your own mental health as you are helping someone struggling with their own mental health struggles, that, especially when it's a family member. If you've done everything that you can to get them to seek help and they do not, or they relapse or they default the medication, that you then should seek help for yourself to deal with what you're seeing happen in your child or in your partner. That is also important, because, you can only go so far, but it's also important to care for yourself.
Yeah. 2023 is obviously marking a new year. The kids are going to be going back to school very soon, and some of them are dealing with some very, very difficult issues, even at a young and tender age. Issues such as bullying, confidence issues, having to build up their self-esteem. As a parent who's currently watching this program, what are some of the signs that one should look out for for issues of mental health, but amongst our children?
I think it's the state of emotions and their change in behavior. There's always a factor or a trigger, a sign for something going on with a child. But I think what also hampers helping children is I have seen that parents are often in denial. They don't want their child to have a mental health problem. So I think the parents should also understand that it's not necessarily that you've failed them as a parent. It's just that maybe they are more predisposed to whatever it is that they're going through, and it's okay to seek help. So I've seen that with some parents, they actually want to get their child to do more things or to be out in the sun just so they don't have a mental health illness. And yet you see the child has 200 activities that they're already doing, and you cannot add any more. But and it's always because the balance in the brain, the neurochemistry in the brain is out of balance. That's why the child probably needs intervention. But when it comes to things like bullying, and intervention as early as possible is important, so that it does not end up being a crisis for the child. And also, if you see that the school is not doing what it is that they're supposed to do, I think taking it up with the officials is also very important. But it's always important to protect your child in such instances, and to also understand that your child is in their own journey. So therefore it's important to note that sometimes it's not because you are lacking as a parent that your child is predisposed to things that they are struggling with, that it is their journey for them to get the help. And that's where you take them to clinical psychologists for their own journey of healing.
Well, Dr. Mashego, it is a new year, and a lot of us are probably compiling those New Year's resolutions and setting out those goals for the year. What's your sort of advice to anyone that wants to kind of start off really strong, but also finish off really strong? You get so many opinions about having realistic goals and having not too many goals, but at the end of the day, it's all very subjective and it's all very relative. But I do think there is a healthy way for one to personally develop themselves. What's your advice on that?
I think, the important one is to make sure that you are not overburdening yourself with a lot of goals, but also to understand why. I think the understanding of why that thing that you want to change or that thing you want to achieve, what is the motive behind it? What is the motivation and the drive behind it? And also to have contingency. Like if you want to, for example, lose weight, you cannot, if you haven't been running every day of your life, start, planning to run 7 days a week, 2 hours, a day. It's important to also set realistic goals so that you're not setting yourself up for failure. So to make sure that, for example, going 3 times a week to the gym minimum is enough, and then anything more and extra is a bonus. So to be sort of be gentle with yourself as well, so not to have this pressure to achieve this thing immediately. So to understand that it's going to be a journey and a process, and you need to be in the moment as well, so that you're not on survival mode, that the solution that you are trying to achieve or the goal you're trying to achieve does not become the problem.
Right. Dr. Mashego, right. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for coming onto the program and sharing your insights with us. That was a clinical and sports psychologist and life coach, Dr. Keitumetse Mashego. It's time now to